Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I pray for the guidance and help of Almighty God.
Here is the simplified version in easy English, written like a dramatic video script. Treat it as a dramatic narration, not verified news. Even while people were still grieving, there was also a feeling of thankfulness for a life filled with duty, service, and faith. The nation had seen many difficult moments before. Britain had watched royal scandals, family arguments, emotional speeches, and unforgettable scenes inside the palace. People had sent letters, cards, and messages of support during hard times, but very few announcements had ever shocked the country like this one. According to reports and palace whispers, King Charles made a decision that could change Queen Camilla's future and also change the direction of the monarchy. The decision was so serious that many royal insiders were left speechless. Across the United Kingdom, people started asking the same question: what does this mean for the royal family? Was this the right decision for the future of the monarchy? Was it necessary to protect the crown, or was it a painful step that could damage the royal family even more? The story begins with what many people are now calling the constitutional decision. Just moments before the announcement, the atmosphere around Clarence House felt tense and heavy. The curtains moved gently in the wind as King Charles stepped forward in front of cameras and reporters. Flashlights filled the room. Everyone was waiting for a normal royal statement, but the king's face told a different story. He looked tired. His expression was serious. His voice shook slightly as he began to speak. Then he said words that nobody expected. Queen Consort Camilla would step back from her royal title, effective immediately, while a full investigation took place. The room went silent. Then a wave of shock moved through the press. Reporters looked at each other in disbelief. Some palace aides froze where they stood. It was not just a normal announcement. It felt like a moment that could be remembered for generations. In modern royal history, a reigning king had never made such a public and painful decision about his own wife. It was not only about family. It was about duty, trust, tradition, and the image of the crown. Nearby, Queen Mary's crown was placed on a pedestal. It shone under the lights with its diamonds and rare stones. Once, that crown had represented royal unity and strength, but now it seemed to stand as a silent witness to division and pain. Its beauty only made the tension in the room feel stronger. Outside, reporters shouted questions, their voices mixed with the sound of church bells ringing under London's gray sky. Inside, the royal household seemed to be falling into silence. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. What could force a king to make such a decision? According to palace whispers, the reason was not only gossip. It was connected to something real and physical, a sapphire brooch. This was not an ordinary piece of jewelry. It was said to have once belonged to the late Princess Diana. The brooch suddenly appeared at an auction in Geneva, and this created panic inside royal circles. People began asking how such a personal and historic item could end up outside the royal collection. At first, the answer was unclear, but investigators allegedly traced the path of the brooch back to Ray Mill House, Camilla's private residence in Wiltshire. Soon after, a secret middleman was also identified. That person was reportedly placed under serious investigation by palace officials. Princess Anne was said to be the first person to raise the alarm. She has always been known as practical, direct, and protective of royal duty. When she heard about the brooch, she believed the matter had to be taken seriously. Prince William was also deeply affected. Because the brooch was linked to his mother, Princess Diana, he wanted answers immediately. He felt that Diana's memory had to be protected. Catherine, Princess of Wales, remained calm and respectful, but she also urged King Charles to act quickly. She is said to have told him that the crown must be protected, whatever the personal cost. When the moment came, King Charles was shaken. His hands reportedly trembled as he signed the decree. The pen seemed heavy in his hand, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. With one signature, centuries of royal tradition, personal love, public duty, and private pain came together. His words were simple but powerful. The crown must remain pure. With that, the unbelievable became real. The British monarchy now seemed to stand at a dangerous crossroads. It was still bright and powerful on the outside, but inside it looked cracked and wounded. For centuries, the monarchy had survived through loyalty, image, and tradition, but now it faced questions about trust, morality, and law. How can a royal family deal with possible betrayal inside its own walls? How can a king protect the crown when the pain is so personal? Outside the palace gates, the world watched with shock and curiosity. Some people were fascinated, some were sympathetic, others were angry. Inside the palace, staff whispered in quiet corners. Advisors met behind closed doors. The air felt heavy with secrets that had not yet been revealed. Could this be the moment that changes the royal line forever? Could one lost or stolen jewel damage the delicate thread of royal history? Or was this brooch only the beginning of a much deeper story? To understand this moment, one must look back. Behind the announcement was not just one scandal. There was a long story of inheritance, rivalry, grief, guilt, and silent tension hidden beneath royal beauty. The sapphire brooch, once seen as a symbol of love and memory, had now become the spark that started one of the most dramatic royal storms of recent times. As the bells continued to ring and the palace gates remained closed, one thing became clear. This was not just a royal scandal. It was the start of a new chapter in an old royal story, where loyalty, love, and legacy met under the shadow of the crown. But another question remained. Was Camilla questioned before the king made the announcement? Did anyone confront her directly? What did she say? Did she deny everything? To understand that, we must go back a few days. On November 8, the atmosphere inside London's Royal Albert Hall was solemn and emotional. The Festival of Remembrance was taking place. Red and gold lights filled the hall. The royal family stood together as music and prayers honored those who had served the country. Camilla stood beside King Charles. Her hand rested gently on his arm. To the cameras, she looked calm, loyal, and graceful. She smiled at the hymns, lowered her head during prayers, and carried herself with confidence. For the public, it looked like a picture of royal unity. But those standing close to the king noticed something different. Charles did not look warm or relaxed. He did not appear angry either. Instead, he looked distant, like a man who had already made a painful decision in his heart. That distance did not stay hidden for long. Soon, it became royal action. Behind palace walls, King Charles and Prince William had reached the same conclusion. For once, father and son were speaking with one voice. Publicly, the decision was described as an administrative change. It was presented as a simple adjustment to royal duties, but insiders reportedly used a stronger word. Final. Outside Buckingham Palace, rain fell through the November fog. Reporters stood waiting, soaked and restless, sensing that something important was about to happen. Inside the palace, the Queen's private rooms stayed lit long after the rest of the building had gone dark. Camilla had not released a public statement. Perhaps she did not need to. Sometimes silence says more than words. The truth was that the decision had been made before it was written down. That evening, Charles met privately with William. According to one palace aide, the meeting lasted only about 20 minutes. At the end, Charles reportedly said that the decision must come from both of them, not as father and son, but as king and heir. Within hours, a joint statement was drafted. The statement would not directly remove titles. It would not openly accuse Camilla of wrongdoing. Such a step could shake the monarchy too strongly, especially at a time when the royal family was already dealing with health concerns, public pressure, and constant rumors. Instead, the language was careful. It spoke about integrity, transparency, and service. On the surface, the words sounded soft and respectful. But behind them was something much harder. It was punishment, written like procedure. It was control, presented as mercy. When the final version reached Camilla, she read it twice. She did not sign it. She did not have to. The message was already clear. That night, she returned to Clarence's house. Staff members said she dismissed her driver earlier than usual and spent the night alone in her drawing room. On a small table near her was an unsealed envelope. On it were only 3 words, "To my king." She did not write more. Perhaps she did not need to. By morning, the mood inside the monarchy had changed. Something had cracked quietly and permanently. The joint statement was released to the public. It was short, barely 100 words, but it was powerful enough to shake every newsroom in Britain. It said Queen Camilla would step back from her individual public duties. It also said the king and the heir stood united in their commitment to transparency and the protection of royal heritage. The public heard diplomacy. The palace heard exile. That night, Clarence House closed part of its private wing. Secretaries were moved. Press officers were replaced. A strange quiet filled the halls. Camilla refused phone calls and ignored offers of sympathy. Only one aide reportedly saw her standing by a window, watching the rain blur the city lights. She whispered, "They have rewritten my purpose." At Windsor Castle, King Charles sat down for a private dinner with Prince William and Princess Anne. There were no cameras, no speeches, and no public smiles. Only 3 people sat together, carrying the weight of the monarchy. Charles looked older and more tired than usual. At last he said, "It's done." Then he added, "She was never the enemy, only the storm." Princess Anne, known for her direct words, answered that the crown does not survive storms through kindness. It survives through silence. William said little, but he understood the cost of the decision. He also understood why it had to be made. This breaking point raised another question. How had everything reached this stage? What hidden moment first set the storm in motion? To understand that, we must look back to the start of Charles's reign. When Charles became king, the world saw a man finally stepping into the role he had waited for his whole life. At the same time, Camilla stepped into a role she had also waited many years to climb. For many people, her rise looked like the final chapter of a long and difficult story. She had lived through scandal. She had faced anger from the public. She had always been compared to Diana. But she had survived it all. Over time, her public image softened. She became known as calm, patient, and supportive. But behind that soft image, some insiders believed there was another side. They said Camilla understood quiet influence very well. She did not need to speak loudly or force her way into decisions. Instead, she knew how to guide things gently from the background. In the early months of Charles's reign, she was seen as a loyal partner. She appeared gracious and steady. The press praised her reading room project and described her as thoughtful and cultural. To the public, she seemed to be settling into her role with grace. But power can grow quietly. According to insiders, palace staff began joking about what they called the Camilla Doctrine. This was said to be her way of ruling through influence, persuasion, and trusted friendships. At the same time, King Charles's schedule became lighter because of medical advice. The public believed he was simply taking care of his health. But inside palace walls, some people noticed that Camilla was becoming more active behind the scenes. She began meeting with a small trusted group at Clarence House. There were 3 people she relied on: a retired journalist, a former political aide, and an old family friend. At first, these meetings seemed harmless. A queen under great pressure needed people she trusted. But slowly, friendship turned into advice. Advice turned into influence. Influence started to look like control. Reports, speeches, and schedules began passing through her circle before reaching the king. Camilla's tone stayed polite and calm, but her presence and decisions grew stronger. Protocol officers noticed small changes. Orders of precedence were adjusted. Patronages moved. Meetings were rearranged. None of these changes were dramatic on their own, but together they showed that the rhythm of the monarchy was changing. William and Catherine watched carefully. Publicly, they remained respectful and diplomatic. They did not make any open objection, but Princess Anne saw danger in what was happening. In private, she reportedly warned Charles that Camilla was creating a court within a court. To Anne, that was dangerous. Royal history had shown many times that hidden circles of power could create division. Charles defended Camilla. He said she was helping him carry the burden of the crown. He believed she was supporting him, not trying to take power from him. He trusted her deeply, perhaps too deeply. By late 2025, the change was almost invisible to the outside world, But inside the palace, it was clear. Camilla had become a quiet center of influence. Her reach extended from palace corridors to political contacts. With every decision she shaped, the line between support and control became harder to see. Then came a shocking discovery during an internal audit. A major problem had been found. The discovery sent fear through the palace. What did it reveal? How far did the problem go? This is where the story moves into the shadows behind the crown. One evening, King Charles sat alone in his private library at Buckingham Palace. The room was dim. The only light came from the fire and a few lamps. Outside, wind moved through the royal gardens. Inside, there was only silence. On the desk in front of him was a formal letter sealed with the royal crest. It came from Queen Camilla's office. The message was short and cold. It said she would not attend the upcoming 50th anniversary celebration of the Royal Charitable Trust. The reason given was a busy schedule. But Charles reportedly knew the real reason. To him, it felt like indifference. To the public, this would have looked like an ordinary royal scheduling issue. To Charles, it felt like a personal insult. The woman who stood beside him in public was not there for him when it mattered. The flames moved in the fireplace as he stared at the letter. His hands tightened. The crown had become heavier with each passing day. He felt surrounded by duty, illness, and betrayal. At that moment, he reportedly decided that he would not continue living inside a false image. His mind went back to early 2024. During that time, he had been dealing with cancer. He remembered lying in a quiet room at Sandringham while pale winter light came through the curtains. Machines beeped beside him. Every sound reminded him that his health was fragile. But according to this dramatic account, the deepest pain was not physical. It was emotional. The story claims that Camilla did not come to him, did not call, and did not give him the comfort he expected. While he was struggling, newspapers showed her smiling in elegant clothes. Headlines praised her dignity and grace. The public saw a stable queen. Charles, in this version of events, felt alone. He began to believe that she loved the throne more than the man wearing the crown. During those lonely nights, Charles looked through an old photo album. In it were pictures of Diana. One photo from Highgrove in 1987 showed her smiling brightly. The memory brought pain. Diana had not needed jewels or titles to be loved by the public. She had a natural warmth. Charles remembered words Diana had once said to him, according to the story. She had warned him that if he chose Camilla, he would lose both love and peace. At the time, he had ignored it. Now, those words seemed to return like a painful echo. In the silence of recovery, Charles faced a bitter thought. He had sacrificed love, reputation, and peace, only to end up with a lonely crown and a marriage full of doubt. But what betrayal could hurt more than failed duty? What secret could leave a king haunted by questions of loyalty and loss? The final confrontation came on a cold evening, October 11. The palace released a careful statement. It said Her Majesty the Queen Consort would assist with an internal inquiry about the history and ownership of certain royal heirlooms. The words sounded calm and polite, but inside the palace, they meant something serious. A storm was beginning. At Clarence House, the usual piece of royal ceremony disappeared. The Maple Room, famous for its polished wood table and royal portraits, became the center of the confrontation. It had once been used for important royal preparations. That night, it felt more like a courtroom. King Charles sat at the head of the table. His face showed tired determination. Princess Anne sat to one side, sharp and serious. Prince William and Catherine sat nearby, quiet but tense. At the far end sat Camilla. She looked pale. She was not wearing her usual pearls. Instead, she wore a simple gold chain. Even that small change seemed meaningful. For a while, nobody spoke. The silence was heavy. Finally, Camilla broke it. Her voice shook slightly, but she stayed controlled. "You all think I stole something," she said. Then, she looked at Charles and asked, "Do you think I stole her?" Everyone understood what she meant. She was talking about Diana. Diana's memory still lived in every corner of royal life, and Camilla had always lived in her shadow.